All right, so here we are. This is Stranded, the Australian Canadian music and talk show, and occasionally it converts to the Canadian New Zealand music and talk show, especially when we have special guests like today's guest, Fleur Jack. Hello, Fleur.
Hello, how's it going?
Very good. It's a joy to speak with you. You have come up on my radar through a friend up here in Vancouver who I met, and he was a music lover, and he told me all about you. And when he told me that you were a Kiwi transplanted to North America, I was really excited to talk to you. So let's go right back to New Zealand, and could you fill us in a little bit about your musical start there and how playing in bands segued into radio?
Sure, absolutely. I started out as any young singer-songwriter does. You know, you start with a little bit of forced piano lessons and then go into guitar and then sing a little in the high school choir and moved on to busking, went to music school, joined a rock band. I hear that story over and over again. Everybody was forced into lessons really early, hated it, and then found their way back to music somehow. But that was my story as well, and I loved music school. I'd always kind of thought that you had to be really crap at music if you had to go to music school and learn it. Like, because I was 18 at the time, so I thought I knew it all. But it was great that I went because I knew that I didn't by the time I got there, and there was so much to learn, and there still is. That hasn't really stopped. I played in the rock band that I met at music school. We were called the Twitch, and I believe there's actually a Canadian Twitch, and there's an American Twitch too. So we obviously weren't the only Twitches out there, but we did really well for a little rock and roll band. We were based in Auckland and toured New Zealand more times than I could count, and toured Australia as well. Played some shows in Melbourne. I think we did 3 visits to Melbourne and 1 to Hong Kong as well.
What sort of years was this time period?
We started 2003 and ended 2012.
Right.
So I'd come out to Canada and the States and then headed home and did more shows with the Twitch before we officially called it quits, because I was moving out here a bit more indefinitely by 2012. So we had to call it. But I mean, it was the best years of my life in my early 20s, playing pubs and getting into all sorts of mischief on the road.
And when did the seed to get planted to actually move to these parts? I mean, was there a moment when you were playing somewhere in America and you were like, yeah, this is it? Because it's a huge decision to move, transplant yourself.
Well, yeah, it was weird and it was bittersweet because by that time I was working in radio. I was writing for magazines, and I had this half music thing going and then half media thing going, and I loved my job and I loved my other part-time jobs, and then I loved music as well. And I'd done a bunch with the Twitch, and it wasn't until I released my first solo album that I ended up coming out these ways on a solo tour. My granddad lives in Colorado, on the border of New Mexico and Colorado, in a little town called Trinidad, and so it was mostly a visit to see him with my family the first couple of weeks I came out. And then once my solo album, was released and I was back in New Zealand, I thought, well, I've toured enough around, with the Twitch, and I should just go and do a solo tour. And I thought, well, if I can book a tour of New Zealand, why can't I book a tour of the States? And so the idea was to come up to America and visit my granddad and tour around. And I can't remember how I ended up tagging Canada onto it as well, but I don't remember the defining moment that that got me to Canada, but I ended up starting there and thinking, well, if I can do the States, I can do Canada too. So I only did BC, and I did 5 shows up that way. So what made me want to stay in the States? It was a boy. Yeah, that was love.
As it often is. Yeah, the transplanting stories.
Yeah. Well, I was coming down from Canada, and I had rented an amp for the tour for those shows. I forget the name of the music store. It was like something and something. It's one
Long and McQuaid?
Yeah, that's it. That's one. Fabulous. And I couldn't obviously take that across the border and then through from my American shows. So I had the idea that I would rent that amp for Canada, and then I would buy one here. And the gentleman that ended up selling my amp ended up being my husband.
Oh, wow.
So we met, and I mean, it was, love at first sight. It sounds very cliche when I say it now, but it really was, and it was quite a magical time. He came to that Seattle show and then followed me through Olympia, Portland, and ended up flying out to Las Vegas to see me there too. When I got back to New Zealand, I had to throw a grenade at my life there and my job at Kiwi FM and say goodbye to a lot of friends. And I packed up and came back here on a tourist visa to record my next album and to stay with him. And by the time I got back and recorded that album, he proposed, and we went on to the next visa, which was the fiancé visa.
Whoa, that's brilliant. Before we go in any further, I wanted to go back to the radio stuff. Of course, it's close to my heart doing this every week. I love radio so much. I never thought I'd be talking to someone else who is deeply involved in musical creation, but also radio. What can you tell us about those years? Because I know that you really were committed to independent music, like through and through, and raising awareness of local bands. What can you tell us about that?
It was a fun ride doing my radio show. So I worked for a station called Kiwi FM, which is still around. The format slightly changed from when I was there. When I was there, it was 100% New Zealand music, and my show was 7 to 9 in the evenings, Monday to Friday, and it was basically to promote up and coming underground, underground talent that was different to the daytime playlist. It was a little more of what was really going on instead of just the big hits. You go to the pub on the corner on Friday night that has the live bands, and I was playing those bands on the show, and they would come up and they would promote their shows, and they would play live on the show, and I would give away their albums, and it was a real community vibe, even though it was 3 markets. So any touring bands that were coming up, I'd have them on the show too, and it was great. There were so many bands that came through that, the younger bands that would have their very first ever interview with me, and I could look back, 5 years later and see them on the charts and think, I helped those guys out when they were just starting out, and that was always a really good vibe for me. And in turn, with my own music, it ended up being that some of those people could then help me out with venue dates, because everybody that ends up being a musician ends up going on to something else. If you're from New Zealand, you end up doing 5 jobs in one,
Yep.
being either in the media or working for a venue or being a sound person. So everybody ends up knowing everybody else. It's kind of a small community.
It is, yeah. And speaking of that, I'm curious, it might be hard for you to name only a few, but all those years, are there any acts that stick out in your mind that were just really great and unheralded, that listeners of our show might be able to find their stuff online, kind of thing?
I think some of the breakthrough artists, like, and this isn't somebody that I personally interviewed. As I was leaving, Lord was breaking on Kiwi FM, and then she was played on Kiwi FM, and then it went on to the bigger, more commercial stations, and she'd taken over New Zealand before she took over the world. But there are other artists like Lady Hawk who made it big in the States, and then there's artists like Brooke Fraser who took over. I think she was huge in Germany, but I guess humble beginnings in New Zealand. But my show was very much on the outside of that. I mean, I did champion the underground artists, and some of those bands went on to bigger and better things, but they were really the little guys that were unchampioned by anybody else, and that's why it was special for me.
It is. I can speak to how personally gratifying that is. It really is, week to week. I could just picture you walking in the CiTR studios here and being right at home with our community.
Oh, cool. I'd love
headspace.
to. Hopefully next time I come up, I'll be able to do just that.
Oh, absolutely. It's an open invite, yeah. So, I guess that brings us right back to the closer geographical area. So you are still living in Seattle. As far as, life there, musical life, has it lived up to your expectations of what you had envisaged? And, what has it been like for you being a transplanted Kiwi musician in Seattle?
Well, the first start for me was recording, and so it wasn't that I came here and played a lot of gigs. I came in and recorded, and the studio for me that I picked, and I mean, obviously, if you listen to my stuff, it's a lot more sort of folky country than the studio that I picked. But I picked London Bridge Studios, and that's the home of Green River, Mudhoney, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all the grunge heads. And I've got a huge passion for rock and roll and for grunge music. And I wanted to record there, and I walked in and I said, here are my songs, let's make a grunge. Let's make them sound grunge, even though my music isn't grunge. It was a lot of fun. So recording for me and walking in there with all of that history was pretty amazing. And to think as well, Lane from Alice in Chains, that he recorded his last album there before he died, and the same went for other musicians as well. It was kind of like almost a final recording studio for some of the guys in there, and it's kind of weird. In New Zealand, you don't have a lot of big sort of dramatic heroin overdose stories, or I suppose there are a few, but they're not as famous as the bands that I was walking into that studio and seeing their gold albums on the wall. That was pretty huge for me. In terms of gigging and playing shows around the place, I had to take a little bit of a break because I got pregnant. And I have my son Phoenix now is 8 months old, and my husband and I, Wesley and I, we've started a band called the W Lovers, and we're gaining more traction through town, and it's a lot more fun playing as a band than when I first came here. I was still playing solo a lot, so it's a lot more fun having that camaraderie, and you end up getting a lot more interesting shows when you're playing in a band than when you're playing solo. Well, to my personal preferences, anyway. But yeah, it's when you're starting out, especially if you've got fans back home, that you can put a gig up on Facebook or whatever you do to promote yourself. But if all of your network is in a different country, it's kind of difficult to get people out for a show. So I've really felt like I'm starting right from scratch again, and that's been really humbling and really an amazing journey, because the new fans that come along to our gigs now are really there for the music and not just old friends, which makes a difference, and it's quite gratifying. Yeah.
I'm just curious. I mean, along the way, have you happened to meet any of these old sort of Seattle rockers? I remember I went down for the Nick Cave show down there, and I was literally standing in line, and the whole band, Mudhoney, was standing right next to me.
Oh.
and I said hello to the bassist, who's actually an Australian guy. He was in this band called Lubricated Goat in the 80s, and joined I was like, it's kind of surreal to me to be standing next to the quintessential Seattle band. Have you crossed paths with anyone there yet? Anyone?
No, they're all still mythical creatures as far as I'm concerned. I love that. I mean, having worked in radio, I'm not the kind of person that if I ran into somebody famous would be all crazy and fangirl or anything.
Yeah.
But I think from a musical perspective, I would be awed. But no, I would love that. I'd love to meet a lot of them. But no, I haven't met anybody like that yet at the shows. Just other really cool musicians that I've met along the way that are all up and coming, and I found it quite a welcoming environment. And once you impress is the wrong word, but once you play a show with somebody and they like what you do, there is a community vibe within the musicians here that they will recommend you to somebody else. And we've just been recommended for a show with this duo called the Grahams, or the Grahams, depending on, I guess, how you pronounce them. I think people would say Graham Cracker, but it's, to us down under, it'd be Graham. They're a duo who lived in Tennessee not Tennessee, in the Mississippi River on a houseboat, and they have a lot of fans, but I'd never heard of them. But they're coming through on a tour, and we've just got the opening slot for them. So it's next Tuesday, and I'm really excited about it. It's kind of the direction that I've been wanting to head in with our music, to open up for some of the big wigs coming from the South. I'm hoping to tour down there by the end of the year.
Actually, speaking of America, it's good timing, because I wanted to ask you about your track, The Ghosts of Cimarron, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, because it sounds like pure Americana sound, and there's a reference there to outlaws like Jesse James, I think, and the Santa Fe Trail. Can you tell us about that song? It sounds like a great storytelling song.
Well, right where my grandparents are, on the cusp of Trinidad, the Colorado-New Mexican border, There is a little town called Cimarron, just right in New Mexico. And there's, in Cimarron, they had this hotel called the St. James. And all the old cowboys used to go through there. My granddad took my family for a visit down there, and I've ended up playing a show there and visiting two other times now. And it's an amazing little piece of history. There's this cowboy called Clay Ellison, and he used to go down to the bar and shoot his gun into the ceiling and feed whiskey to his horse. And apparently 28 people died in the hotel. You know, there's just all these crazy stories.
28? Oh my God.
Yeah, there's this one cowboy who won the deed to the hotel, Thomas James Wright, and he's playing poker around the table. He wins the deed to the hotel, walks back to his room 18 and gets shot in the back and bleeds out and dies. And they actually still have room 18 locked to the public. You can't go in there still because he haunts the place. I went back and stayed. After I played my show there last time, I was staying in the same room as my mum. She came from New Zealand to tour the last few dates of my last tour with me. And there was some creepy stuff that was going on. You know, just random knocking, random dripping, you know, cat dripping, knocking. People, like the hallways creaking, like people are walking down the halls and you poke your head out and it's just too dark and there's nothing going on. But it's a freaky place. It's really, really freaky. And especially if you're, even if you're not in tune with the supernatural or whatever, you can just walk in and feel that kind of. It's spooky in there. It's really spooky. There's, you know, animal heads all over the walls, and as you walk down the hallways, there's pictures of all the old dead cowboys and how they died, who they were married to, what they died from, what they were in jail for at the time, and it was just so inspiring for me to go and see that kind of place. And the song just it pretty much just fell out as soon as I got back to New Zealand, and I wrote that up really quick. And that's why I'm hoping to tour the South a little bit further in America, because the history and the cowboys, and it's so dripping with great stories. And as a storyteller and a songwriter, I can just pick up on those things really easily, and I get so inspired to write.
Oh, it's endless, the history, you're right. I mean, you know, we're both from these fabulous countries, Australia and New Zealand, but they are comparatively smaller and less stuff. It seems to have happened there that's mythologized, I guess. And
for New Zealand, it's not as old. The stories don't go back that far. Well, the W Lovers, with my crazy halfway accent, is my husband and I. We're the songwriting team, and we're writing kind of country music. Americana country, old country is kind of where I'd place it. And it's a lot of fun. My husband plays mandolin, I play guitar, we both sing. We're writing songs about, you know, traveling on the tours that we've been on, either as Fleur Jack or as, out to the shows that we've been doing as the W Lovers. Writing songs about road trips and rodeos and Canyonwind and all of that sort of thing. We don't have anything recorded yet, but we do have a Facebook page, which is facebook.com/WLoversMusic, W as in the letter of the alphabet. And there is a video of us playing live on the Seattle Bremerton ferry. It was kind of an accident that it got snatched, but so there is a song of ours out that people can go and check out on YouTube. Just type in W Lovers and you'll find it. And that's it. I mean, that's what I'm working on at the moment. My solo stuff is on hiatus, and until I decide that there's too much music coming out that doesn't fit what we're doing. But at the moment, everything that's coming out seems to be perfect for the band.
That sounds great, and I know you're heavily immersed too in child raising too. And do you think in the future you might have another trip up across the border here to Vancouver?
I'd love to. And actually, my passport is running out, and I've just got a passport for my husband and baby, so I've got to get my one. But you know, being in Seattle, you're only a couple of hours north, and I'd love to come back up again. I had such a great time in Vancouver. I loved Kelowna. And I spent my birthday in Kamloops as well. So I'd love to visit all of those places, and more as well. But I had such a great time. I'd love to come back up.
Well, you can definitely count on the support of the station here, and it'd be wonderful to meet you in person sometime.
Well, if I come up, we'll definitely be popping in. Hopefully we can do that before the end of the year.
Sure, that sounds great.
I have a friend up there as well who makes jewellery. He works out of Commercial Drive. His name is Ken Ken Claude Lambert, and he is a fantastic jewellery maker if you're ever looking for some really original pieces. Ken Claude Lambert is his name. He's got a Facebook page for his jewellery. It's really amazing. Check it out.
Cool, I will. Thank you. And I will mention that on air.